In the year 2147, a strange signal came from deep space. It was faint at first, almost like static on an old radio. But as scientists listened closer, they realized it wasn't random noise. The signal had patterns-repeated sequences that suggested intelligence. This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community and governments around the world. For weeks, experts worked tirelessly to decode what the message might mean. The breakthrough came when Emily Carter, a linguist known for her work with ancient languages, joined forces with Ryan Hughes, an astrophysicist who specialized in extraterrestrial communications. Together, they managed to piece together fragments of the transmission. What they found was both shocking and heartbreaking. The message contained coordinates pointing to a distant star system and words that roughly translated, "To help us." Whoever or whatever had sent this message was in desperate need. News of the discovery spread quickly. Governments held emergency meetings to discuss what to do next. Some leaders argued that humanity should stay out of it. They said Earth had enough problems of its own. Climate change, poverty, and political unrest were still unresolved issues. Others worried about the risks. What if this was a trap? What if helping these unknown beings put Earth in danger? Most nations agreed that doing nothing was the safest choice. But not everyone thought that way. Alex Bennett, a diplomat from the United States, stood up during one of the United Nations debates. His voice was calm, but firm as he spoke. He reminded everyone of the times in history when humans had turned their backs on those in need. He talked about compassion and how helping others defined humanity's character. He argued that if humans refused to act now, they would be no better than the rest of the galaxy's cold and indifferent species. Alex's speech didn't win over everyone, but it convinced enough people to take action. NASA agreed to send a small team to investigate further. A spaceship called the Odyssey was prepared for the mission. Its crew included Commander Laura Hayes, a seasoned astronaut known for her leadership skills; Daniel Ross, a skilled pilot with nerves of steel; Samantha Green, a biologist eager to study alien life forms; Jacob Miller, an engineer capable of fixing anything; and Kevin Doyle, a communications expert fluent in multiple languages. As the Odyssey launched into the vastness of space, millions watched on screens across the globe. People were divided. Some cheered for the brave crew, while others criticized the mission as reckless and unnecessary. Despite the mixed reactions, the team aboard the Odyssey remained focused. Their journey would take months, giving them plenty of time to prepare for whatever awaited them at the destination marked by the mysterious signal. During the long voyage, tensions sometimes ran high among the crew members. Lavra kept everyone busy with training exercises and simulations to ensure they were ready for any situation. Daniel spent hours tinkering with the ship's navigation systems, determined to make the journey as smooth as possible. Samantha studied every scrap of data available about exoplanets, hoping to predict what kind of environment they might encounter. Jacob worked on backup plans for equipment failures, knowing how crucial his role would be. And Kevin practiced decoding signals, imagining all the ways communication could go wrong. Finally, after months of travel, the Odyssey reached the edge of the star system mentioned in the signal. What they saw left them speechless. The planet, which they later named Arender, looked devastated. Thick clouds of ash covered the sky, blocking out most sunlight. Rivers seemed dried up, and large sections of land appeared barren. Even from orbit, signs of advanced civilization were visible. Crumbling structures and ruins hinted at a once thriving society, now reduced to rubble. Lavra gave the order to descend. As the ship approached the surface, the crew braced themselves for first contact. None of them knew what to expect. Would the inhabitants be hostile, friendly, or perhaps too far gone to even notice their arrival? When they landed, They stepped out cautiously, wearing protective suits designed to shield them from unknown hazards. It didn't take long before they encountered the aliens. Tall and slender, the creatures had translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the dim light. Glowing veins pulsed beneath their surface, giving them an otherworldly appearance. At first, the aliens seemed wary, keeping their distance. But Kevin, using visual symbols displayed on a handheld device, began trying to communicate. Slowly, haltingly, understanding started to form between the two species. Through gestures and pictures, the aliens revealed their story. Their son was dying prematurely, causing catastrophic changes to their environment. Crops failed, water sources vanished, and their technology couldn't keep pace with the destruction. They had reached out to neighboring civilizations for help, but none responded. Many assumed Earth would follow suit that humans would ignore. Their plight just like everyone else, but the crew of the Odyssey wasn't there to ignore them. Lavra made the decision to offer aid immediately. She contacted Earth, explaining the dire situation and requesting supplies and resources. Back home, opinions remained split. Politicians argued over budgets, and protests erupted outside space agencies. Yet ordinary citizens rallied behind the mission, organizing fundraisers and petitioning their leaders to support the effort. Supplies eventually arrived, along with instructions on sustainable energy solutions. The crew got to work, collaborating with the aliens to implement new technologies. Samantha taught them how to grow crops resistant to harsh conditions. Jacob repaired damaged machinery, finding innovative ways to adapt it to local resources. Kevin continued bridging the language gap, forming a close bond with one of the alien leaders named Vela. Every step forward brought challenges. Equipment malfunctioned. Resources ran low. Doubts crept into the minds of some crew members. But Lavra never wavered. She reminded her team why they had come to prove that humanity could rise above fear and selfishness. By choosing kindness, they hoped to inspire not only themselves, but also the rest of the galaxy. And so, the first chapter of humanity's interstellar journey unfolded. Against all odds, humans dared to help where no one else would. Little did they know their actions would have consequences far beyond what any of them could imagine. The crew of the Odyssey stepped onto the surface of Arendar with a mix of awe and dread. The air was thick with ash, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The ground beneath their boots felt brittle, as if it might crumble at any moment. Lavra Hayes led the team cautiously, her eyes scanning the desolate landscape for signs of life. They had come too far to turn back now, but none of them could shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger than themselves. It wasn't long before they spotted movement in the distance. At first, it was just shadows flickering against the haze. Then, slowly, figures emerged from the gloom. The aliens were taller than humans, with slender frames and translucent skin that shimmered faintly even in the dim light. Their glowing veins pulsed like rivers of energy running through their bodies. For a moment, both groups simply stared at each other, unsure of what to do next. Kevin Doyle stepped forward, holding up his handheld device. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, practicing ways to communicate without words. On the screen, he displayed simple images: a sun, water, food, and hands reaching out. The aliens tilted their heads, studying the symbols carefully. One of them raised a long, graceful arm and pointed to the image of the sun. Kevin nodded enthusiastically, encouraged by the response. Slowly, haltingly, a connection began to form. Through gestures and pictures, the aliens shared their story. Their planet, once lush and vibrant, had been devastated by the premature death of their sun. The climate had shifted violently, turning fertile lands into barren wastelands. Rivers dried up, crops failed, and entire cities collapsed under the strain. Their technology, once advanced enough to rival Earth's, had proven useless against the relentless forces of nature. Desperate, they sent out a signal, hoping anyone would hear their plea. When Kevin relayed this information to the rest of the crew, there was a heavy silence. Samantha Green clenched her fists tightly, her heart breaking for these people who had lost so much. Jacob Miller rubbed the back of his neck, already thinking about how they could adapt their tools to help. Daniel Ross muttered under his breath, "We're going to need a miracle." But Laura Hayes didn't hesitate. She turned to the aliens and made a gesture of her own, placing one hand over her chest and then extending it outward, palm open. It was a universal sign of offering aid. The aliens seemed to understand. One of them, taller than the others, and adorned with intricate markings on its arms, stepped forward. This was Vela, as Kevin would later learn. Vela placed a hand on his chest and mirrored Laura's gesture. A bond was formed, not just between two species, but between two worlds struggling to survive. Back on Earth, news of the first contact spread like wildfire. People were fascinated by the images sent back from Arender, the towering aliens, the ruined cities, and the determined faces of the Odyssey crew. Yet fascination quickly gave way to division. Protesters gathered outside space agencies, holding signs that read, "Fix Earth first, and no resources for aliens." Politicians argued over budgets, claiming the mission was draining funds needed for domestic issues. Conspiracy theorists took to social media, spreading wild theories about hidden agendas and alien invasions. Despite the backlash, support for the mission grew stronger among ordinary citizens. Grassroots movements sprang up across the globe, organizing fundraisers and petitioning governments to send more supplies. Alex Bennett, the diplomat who had championed the mission from the start, became a central figure in rallying public opinion. He appeared on talk shows and gave speeches, reminding everyone why humanity had chosen to help. "If we turn our backs now," he said during one televised interview, "we'll be no better than the rest of the galaxy." Meanwhile, the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize Arender's environment. Samantha collaborated closely with the aliens, teaching them how to cultivate crops resistant to harsh conditions. She introduced them to hydroponic systems, showing them how to grow plants without soil, using nutrient water. The aliens adapted quickly, their intelligence surpassing anything Samantha had anticipated. Together, they planted rows of green shoots in makeshift domes, creating small oases amidst the devastation. Jacob focused on repairing the aliens' damaged machinery. Much of it was beyond salvage, but he managed to retrofit some devices to harness geothermal energy. The process was painstaking, requiring him to work long hours in cramped spaces filled with dust and debris. His hands were often raw and blistered, but he never complained. Every time he powered up a new generator or fixed a broken pump, the aliens gathered around, watching in silent gratitude. Jacob didn't need words to know he was making a difference. Lavra coordinated everything, ensuring resources were used efficiently and keeping morale high. She held daily meetings with the crew, discussing progress and addressing concerns. When tensions flared, and they often did, she reminded everyone why they were there. "This isn't just about saving a planet," she told them one evening, as they sat together inside the ship. "It's about proving that humanity can rise above fear and selfishness. If we succeed here, we'll inspire not only ourselves, but the entire galaxy." Kevin continued building trust with Vela and the other aliens. Over time, their communication improved, moving beyond basic symbols to more complex exchanges. Kevin learned that the aliens called themselves the Arendians, and that their society had once thrived on art and science. Now, survival had become their sole focus. Vela often showed Kevin murals depicting their history-vivid scenes of flourishing. Cities, starships exploring distant worlds, and celebrations of discovery. Each mural ended abruptly, replaced by images of darkness and despair. Kevin felt a lump in his throat every time he saw them. One day, while working on a water purification system near the edge of a dried-up riverbed, Samantha noticed something unusual. Embedded in the cracked earth were strange metallic objects that glinted faintly in the weak sunlight. She called Jacob over, and together they dug them out. The objects turned out to be fragments of ancient technology, far more advanced than anything Earth had developed. Samantha speculated that they might have belonged to the Erendians' ancestors, or perhaps another civilization that had visited Erender long ago. The discovery sparked excitement among the crew. If they could study and replicate this technology, it might provide solutions not only for Erender, but also for Earth. Jacob carefully packed the fragments and brought them back to the ship for analysis. As he worked late into the night, poring over schematics and running tests, he couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Humanity had come to Erender to offer help, yet it seemed the Erendians might end up helping humanity in return. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Supplies dwindled faster than expected, forcing the crew to ration food and equipment. Equipment failures occurred frequently, requiring constant repairs. And then there was the emotional toll. Being so far from home, surrounded by devastation, weighed heavily on everyone. Daniel grew increasingly frustrated, snapping at his teammates during arguments. Kevin struggled with guilt, knowing his family back on Earth worried about him every day. Even Lavra, usually unshakable, found herself lying awake at night, questioning whether they were truly making a difference. But through it all, they persevered. Slowly, the seeds of hope began to take root. Crops sprouted in the hydroponic domes, providing fresh food for the first time in years. Water flowed again, albeit in small amounts, reviving parched land. The Erendians, inspired by the crew's determination, joined in the efforts, working side by side with their human allies. Together, they proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, cooperation and compassion could create change. As weeks turned into months, the crew realized they were doing more than rebuilding a planet. They were forging a bond that transcended species and worlds. In helping the Erendians, they had discovered something profound about themselves, that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology or power, but in its capacity for kindness. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, they knew one thing for sure. They had taken the first step toward a brighter future for Erender, for Earth, and for the galaxy beyond. The progress on Erender was slow but steady. Each day brought new challenges, but also small victories that kept the crew of the Odyssey and the Erendians moving forward. Samantha Green spent hours in the hydroponic domes, nurturing the fragile plants that represented hope for the future. She worked alongside the Erendians, teaching them how to care for the crops and adapt the techniques to their environment. The first harvest was modest, just enough to feed a few families, but it was a start. When the Erendians tasted fresh food for the first time in years, their glowing veins seemed to shine brighter, as if joy itself fueled their bodies. Jacob Miller focused on repairing and upgrading the Erendians' ancient machinery. Much of it had been damaged beyond repair, but Jacob's ingenuity knew no bounds. He scavenged parts from abandoned structures and repurposed them into functional tools. One of his greatest achievements was restoring a massive water filtration system buried beneath layers of ash and debris. It took days of non-stop work, but when the system roared to life, clean water began flowing through pipes that had lain dormant for decades. The Erendians gathered around, dipping their hands into the streams, their expressions filled with gratitude. Kevin Doyle continued to bridge the gap between humans and Erendians. His bond with Vela grew stronger as they communicated through gestures, symbols, and shared experiences. Vela introduced Kevin to the Erendians' culture, showing him intricate carvings and murals that told stories of their past. In return, Kevin shared images of Earth photos of bustling cities, sprawling forests, and vast oceans. Through these exchanges, both species began to understand each other better. They realized they were not so different after all. Both had faced hardships. Both had dreams of a better tomorrow. But not everything went smoothly. Supplies from Earth arrived sporadically, delayed by political debates and logistical challenges. Back home, protests against the mission grew louder. Some argued that humanity should focus on solving its own problems before helping others. Others feared the risks of aiding an alien species, claiming it could lead to unforeseen consequences. Despite this, grassroots movements continued to push for support, organizing fundraisers and spreading awareness about the mission's importance. On Arender, tensions simmered among the crew. Daniel Ross grew restless, frustrated by the slow pace of progress. He often muttered under his breath, questioning whether their efforts were worth it. What if we're just delaying the inevitable? He asked one evening during a team meeting. Lavra Hayes listened patiently, her calm demeanor unwavering. She reminded him, and everyone else, that even small steps mattered. Every drop of water, every seed planted, every machine repaired, she said, brings us closer to making a real difference. Lavra herself felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. As the leader of the mission, she bore the burden of every decision. When supplies ran low, she rationed food and equipment carefully, ensuring no one went without. When disagreements arose, she mediated calmly, finding compromises that kept the team united. Yet late at night, when the others slept, she often sat alone in the ship's cockpit, staring out at the desolate landscape. She wondered if they were truly doing enough, or if their efforts would ultimately fall short. One day, disaster struck. A massive solar flare erupted from Arender's dying sun, unleashing waves of radiation that disrupted power grids across the planet. The crew's communication systems failed, plunging them into silence. Machinery sputtered and died, leaving vital projects unfinished. The Arendians panicked, their glowing veins dimming as fear spread among them. Without power, the water filtration system Jacob had worked so hard to restore stopped functioning. Crops in the hydroponic domes began to wilt as temperature controls failed. Laura sprang into action, rallying the team to address the crisis. Jacob volunteered to repair the reactor powering their base camp, knowing it was a dangerous task. Radiation levels were dangerously high, and protective suits offered only limited shielding. But Jacob didn't hesitate. He grabbed his tools and headed into the heart of the facility, determined to get the system back online. The rest of the crew watched anxiously, monitoring his progress remotely. Hours passed, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, Jacob emerged, pale and exhausted, but triumphant. The reactor hummed softly, bringing light and power back to the camp. Cheers erupted from the crew and the Arendians, who gathered around Jacob, touching his arms gently in gratitude. But the victory came at a cost. Jacob collapsed soon after, weakened by radiation exposure. Samantha tended to him as best she could, administering medication and keeping him comfortable. Though he survived, it was clear he would need time to recover fully. The incident served as a turning point for the crew. It reminded them of the stakes and the sacrifices required to make the mission succeed. Daniel, who had been skeptical before, now threw himself into the work with renewed determination. He helped Jacob repair damaged equipment, learning quickly despite his lack of technical expertise. Kevin spent more time with the Arendians, translating updates and reassuring them that help was on the way. Even Laura, who rarely showed vulnerability, opened up to her team, sharing her fears and hopes for the future. As weeks turned into months, the combined efforts of humans and Arendians began to show results. Rivers flowed again, albeit slowly, reviving parched land. New shelters were built using sustainable materials, powered by geothermal energy harnessed from Arender's core. The Arendians adapted quickly, incorporating human knowledge into their own practices. Together, they created something neither species could have achieved alone: a fragile but growing ecosystem, capable of sustaining life. Vela expressed gratitude in ways words couldn't capture. She led her people in creating murals depicting the alliance between humans and Arendians. In one mural, figures of both species stood side by side, planting seeds and building machines. Another showed the Odyssey descending from the sky, a beacon of hope against a backdrop of destruction. Kevin watched as the murals took shape, moved by the depth of emotion behind them. He realized the mission wasn't just about survival. It was about forging connections that transcended language and biology. Back on Earth, news of the progress inspired many, but angered others. Politicians argued over funding, while conspiracy theorists claimed the mission was a cover-up for secret experiments. Yet ordinary citizens rallied behind the crew, organizing campaigns to send additional supplies and resources. Alex Bennett became a symbol of hope, appearing on television and radio shows to advocate for continued support. His speeches resonated deeply, reminding people of humanity's potential for compassion and courage. Despite the challenges, the crew remained steadfast. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they also knew they were making a difference. Every drop of water purified, every crop harvested, and every machine repaired brought them closer to their goal. They weren't just rebuilding a planet, they were proving that cooperation and empathy could overcome even the greatest obstacles. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a faint glow over the ash-covered landscape, Lavra stood outside the ship, gazing at the stars. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people watching and waiting to see what would happen next. She thought about the Arendians, who had welcomed strangers with open arms despite their suffering. And she thought about her team, who had sacrificed so much to make this mission possible. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Against all odds, they had come together not as humans or aliens, but as partners working toward a common goal. The turning point came when the Arendians began to take charge of their own recovery. For months, they had relied heavily on the crew of the Odyssey for guidance and support, but now they started applying what they had learned. Samantha Green watched with pride as groups of Arendians worked together to expand the hydroponic domes, planting rows of crops that stretched farther than ever before. They adapted her techniques to suit their environment, experimenting with different soil substitutes and nutrient solutions. The results were remarkable fields of green, sprouted where once there had been only ash and dust. Jacob Miller, still recovering from radiation exposure, took a step back from the heavy physical work but remained deeply involved in teaching the Arendians how to maintain and repair equipment. He created simple diagrams and instructions, ensuring they could handle problems independently. One day, he stood back as a group of Arendians successfully repaired a broken water pump without his help. Their glowing veins pulsed with excitement as they turned to him, their expressions filled with gratitude. Jacob felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing his efforts had empowered them. Kevin Doyle continued to strengthen the bond between humans and Arendians. His communication skills improved daily, allowing him to convey more complex ideas. Vela often joined him during these sessions, acting as a bridge between the two species. Together, they discussed plans for the future, how to rebuild not just infrastructure, but also culture and community. Kevin shared stories of Earth's history, highlighting moments when humanity had overcome adversity through unity and perseverance. Vela listened intently, her translucent skin shimmering softly in the dim light. Word of humanity's actions spread throughout the galaxy. Other civilizations, previously dismissive or indifferent, began to take notice. Messages arrived at the Odyssey, some expressing gratitude, while others criticized the intervention. A few neighboring species sent supplies and advice, though most remained cautious, unwilling to commit fully. Back on Earth, public opinion shifted dramatically. Grassroots movements gained momentum, organizing global campaigns to support the mission. People donated money, resources, and even volunteered for future expeditions. Alex Bennett became a household name, symbolizing hope and courage in the face of uncertainty. But not everyone celebrated the mission's success. A rogue faction within Earth's military grew increasingly uneasy about the implications of aiding an alien species. They feared the Erendians might pose a threat if their planet recovered too quickly. Secretly, they seized control of a satellite network designed to monitor deep space activity. Using encrypted transmissions, they attempted to sabotage the mission by disabling critical systems aboard the Odyssey. Their plan was subtle, meant to look like technical failures rather than deliberate interference. Lavra Hayes noticed the anomalies almost immediately. Equipment that had functioned perfectly began malfunctioning without explanation. Communication. Signals flickered in and out, causing confusion among the crew and the Erendians. Lavra gathered her team, explaining her suspicions calmly yet firmly. "Something isn't right," she said. "We need to find the source of the problem before it gets worse." Daniel Ross volunteered to investigate, using his expertise as a pilot to trace the disruptions back to their origin. After hours of analysis, Daniel uncovered the truth. The rogue faction's transmissions were rerouting through relay stations near Earth, disguised as routine maintenance updates. With quick thinking, Lara ordered the Odyssey's defense systems to intercept and neutralize the threat. It was a risky move. Disabling the rogue faction's control could escalate tensions, but she believed it was necessary to protect the mission. The operation succeeded, cutting off the sabotage attempt and restoring stability to the ship's systems. News of the thwarted attack reached Earth, sparking outrage and debate. Some praised Laura's decisiveness, calling her a hero who had saved the mission. Others condemned her actions, accusing her of overstepping her authority. Political leaders scrambled to address the fallout, holding emergency meetings to determine the next steps. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens rallied behind the crew, flooding social media with messages of support. The incident only strengthened the resolve of those who believed in the mission's importance. Back on Arender, life continued to improve. The combination of human ingenuity and Erendian determination transformed the barren landscape into something resembling hope. Rivers flowed steadily, irrigating fields of crops that fed growing communities. Shelters powered by renewable energy provided safe havens for families displaced by years of hardship. Art flourished once again, with murals depicting scenes of cooperation and resilience appearing on walls across the planet. Vela led her people in creating a massive mural near the Odyssey's landing site, a tribute to the alliance between humans and Erendians. In its center stood figures representing Laura, Samantha, Jacob, Kevin, and Daniel, surrounded by glowing depictions of Vela and her kind Dot. As time passed, the crew of the Odyssey prepared for their eventual return to Earth. Supplies from home had dwindled, and repairs to the ship were needed before they could make the journey back. Though they looked forward to reuniting with loved ones, none of them wanted to leave Arender behind. The bonds they had formed with the Erendians ran deep, transcending language and biology. Saying goodbye felt impossible. On their final day, the crew gathered with the Erendians for a farewell ceremony. Vela stepped forward, placing a hand on Laura's shoulder. Through gestures and symbols, she conveyed her gratitude, not just for the aid provided, but for the trust and friendship that had grown between their species. Kevin translated her words, his voice thick with emotion. "You have given us more than survival," Vela said. "You have shown us that we are not alone." Lavra responded in kind, speaking directly to Vela and the gathered crowd. "This is not goodbye," she said. "It is the beginning of something greater. Humanity will always stand beside you, no matter the distance." Her words echoed across. The gathering met with cheers and applause from both humans and Erendians alike. As the Odyssey lifted off, leaving Erender's surface behind, the crew gazed out the windows at the planet below. Once a place of despair, it now teemed with life and hope. They knew their journey was far from over. Their actions had set a precedent, proving that humanity could rise above fear and selfishness to help those in need. Against all odds, they had forged a bond that would endure for generations. On Earth, Emily Carter sat in her living room, watching footage of the mission's success. Her grandson climbed out her lap, asking why humans had helped the aliens when no one else would. Smiling softly, Emily replied, "Because sometimes being human means choosing kindness over fear." She held him close, feeling a sense of pride in what humanity had accomplished. Far beyond Earth, in the vastness of space, a new chapter in. Interstellar relations had begun, one defined not by conquest or indifference, but by compassion and unity. Years passed since the crew of the Odyssey returned to Earth, but the impact of their mission lingered like a ripple spreading across a vast ocean. The story of humanity's aid to the Erendians became legend, told in classrooms, documentaries, and books. People marveled at how a small group of humans had reached across the stars to help a dying world. It was more than just an act of kindness. It was proof that compassion could transcend borders. Whether terrestrial or cosmic, back on Erender, life flourished in ways no one had imagined. The rivers flowed steadily, irrigating fields of crops. That fed thriving communities. Forests regrew, their leaves filtering the ash-choked air and bringing fresh oxygen to the planet. Shelters powered by renewable energy dotted the landscape, each one a testament to the collaboration between humans and Erendians. Art and culture blossomed as well, with murals and sculptures celebrating the bond between the two species. Vela became a symbol of unity, leading her people with wisdom and grace while honoring the lessons learned from their human allies. The Erendians did not forget what humanity had done for them. In gratitude, they shared ancient knowledge and technology far beyond anything Earth had developed. This exchange sparked a renaissance on Earth, leading to breakthroughs in medicine, agriculture, and energy. Diseases once thought incurable were eradicated thanks to Erendian medical techniques. Crops resistant to extreme weather conditions helped combat global hunger. Clean energy solutions powered cities without harming the environment. Humanity stepped into a new era of progress, inspired by the generosity of a species they had once saved. Laura Hayes retired from space exploration but remained a prominent figure in public life. She traveled the world, giving speeches about the importance of empathy and cooperation. Her words resonated deeply, reminding people that even in the face of overwhelming odds, kindness could create change. Daniel Ross opened a flight school, teaching young pilots the skills he had honed during his time aboard the Odyssey. Samantha Green continued her work in biology, collaborating with scientists worldwide to adapt Erendian agricultural methods to Earth's ecosystems. Jacob Miller founded a non-profit organization dedicated to repairing and repurposing outdated technology, ensuring no resource went to waste. Kevin Doyle wrote a book detailing his experiences on Erender, describing the beauty and resilience of the alien species he had come to call friends. Alex Bennett, the diplomat who had championed the mission from the start, became a global leader in interstellar diplomacy. He advocated for policies that promoted peaceful cooperation among species, arguing that humanity's future depended on its ability to connect with others. His efforts led to the creation of the Interstellar Alliance, an organization dedicated to fostering understanding and collaboration across the galaxy. Representatives from various civilizations joined, sharing knowledge and resources to tackle common challenges. For the first time in history, humanity stood shoulder to shoulder with other intelligent beings, united by a shared vision of peace and prosperity. Yet not everyone embraced this new era of unity. Some humans feared the influence of alien technology, claiming it would disrupt traditional ways of life. Others worried about the risks of forming alliances with unknown species, citing past conflicts as cautionary tales. Protests erupted in major cities, with demonstrators holding signs that read, "Earth First" and "No to Alien Influence." Conspiracy theorists spread rumors of hidden agendas, accusing governments of prioritizing interstellar relations over domestic issues. Despite these challenges, the majority of people supported the mission's legacy, believing it represented humanity's best qualities: compassion, courage, and curiosity. As decades passed, a bond between humans and Erindians grew stronger. Trade routes were established, allowing goods and ideas to flow freely between the two worlds. Artists exchanged techniques, blending styles to create breathtaking works of art. Scientists collaborated on projects, ranging from climate restoration to space exploration. Children on both planets learned about each other's cultures, fostering mutual respect and understanding. A mural near the Odyssey's landing site became a sacred place, visited by pilgrims from across the galaxy who sought inspiration from the story it told. Emily Carter lived to see much of this transformation. Now elderly, she spent her days watching the stars from her home in Colorado. Her grandson, now grown, often visited her, asking questions about the mission and its significance. One evening, as they sat together under a sky filled with twinkling lights, he asked why humanity had chosen to help when so many others had turned away. Emily smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the glow of distant suns. "Because sometimes," she said, "being human means choosing kindness over fear." Her words echoed far beyond her living room, carried by winds of change sweeping through the galaxy. Humanity had proven itself capable of greatness, not through conquest or domination, but through acts of selflessness and courage. By daring to aid the Erindians, humans had stepped onto the galactic stage as equals, earning the respect and admiration of countless species. They had shown that even in a cold and indifferent universe, warmth and connection could thrive. Erinder, Vela gazed at the stars, thinking of the humans who had changed her world forever. She placed a hand over her heart, then extended it outward, a gesture of gratitude passed down through generations. In the distance, the Odyssey's landing site stood as a monument to hope, surrounded by murals and statues celebrating the alliance between two species. Together, they had faced despair and emerged stronger, proving that unity could overcome even the greatest challenges. And so, humanity's journey continued not as conquerors or bystanders, but as partners in a shared destiny. Against all odds, they had chosen kindness, forging bonds that transcended language, biology, and distance. In doing so, they had redefined what it meant to be human, leaving a legacy of compassion that would endure for centuries to come.